Welcome to No Question About That. This is the midweek pod. It's going to be a mailbag pod today. I'm with Wayne. How's it going, Wayne?
Not bad, thank you, sir. How are you?
Doing all right. Yeah, just about.
Good.
Yeah. Winter, basically. It's miserable and cold and dark at 4 o'clock.
Do you know what? I haven't minded it so much. I'm with you that I didn't really used to be bothered about seasons, and then I did get a bit miserable about it, so I started preferring the summer age, chilling our bones a little bit. But I've liked it this time round because with the baby, she just entered sleep regression, and the dark is helping regulate her a little bit. So I say that on the back of about 4 hours sleep last night. It's still helping. So I don't mind it. I do usually mind it at this time of life now. It's creeping up on me, but this year I'm so grateful for the early nights.
Shot of brandy in the milk. That's what, yeah.
For the baby?
No, for you. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Just helps you get through it. All right, how'd your book launch go? A week since you launched the new book?
Yeah, thank you. I'll give it a little plug here.
Yeah.
There you go.
What's it called? You got to give it the full thing.
Manchester United after Munich. My working title for it was The Phoenix. Talking about the badge on the 58 Cup final, which, as we all know, is more of an allegory. It's not actually a phoenix on the Manchester coat of arms, but I liked the idea that it stood for something more than it being actual. So, it's the book about the post-Munich years, specifically 58-63. It does go up to 68 and round the story off, but it's about the players who came through after the crash, the likes of Alex Dawson, who was already in the team, Mark Pearson, who debuted on the night of the Sheffield Wednesday game, a couple of others, Harry Gregg as well, central figure in the book. The players who didn't win medals for the club and were mostly gone by the time that the club next won a medal. And I thought that there's such a story in there for their contribution and their sacrifice, really, because if you think, and sacrifice is a big word when you think about the fact that lives were lost, but I'm talking about the fact that they sacrificed the stage of their development. They could have gone elsewhere and looked for first team football away from the pressure of the grief and, being around death basically non-stop. And I was also compelled by the story that you will have heard as well, the same way that I've heard it, that everyone who talks about it, who was there at that time, said that Munich was never mentioned for a decade. And I thought, well, it can't exactly be true, but how true was it to the relevance of the everyday life there? So I wanted to kind of get digging in and tell that story. And it's been really rewarding because obviously it's a really emotional part of United's history, and also to help shine a light on those players to tell their story is a nice thing. I don't really know yet because we're still at an early point in the book release, so I'm not quite sure how everyone's connecting with it. It's still a wild song. I'm going to get the reviews coming in, but I did manage to get some copies out to some people beforehand, just to make sure that they got relevant people got their hands on a copy. And one of Harry Gregg's daughters read it, and she sent me a really nice message the night before the book came out, and said that that Harry, obviously a very, very popular figure, but the more that you dig into his story, the more political his story becomes with United. And if anyone knows anything about Harry Gregg, it's that he's the one person who doesn't need anyone to speak for him. He's a very outspoken character. But in that respect, obviously, he's still got to be a part of this story and the way that he tells that story, and a central figure of that story as well. So they were happy with the way that portrayed him faithfully to what they believe in. So that was a really nice message. That's pretty much only the feedback that I've got so far, but I would say it's pretty much the best feedback to get. Do you know what I mean? It settled the nerves a little bit. So
key character,
it's nice. Thank you very much for allowing me a little plug there.
I've written my review on Amazon. AI slop. Get this nonsense off here. Yeah.
Oh, God. Yeah.
I tell you what wasn't nonsense. Manchester United women's victory in the Champions League last night against Paris Saint-Germain. This is Paris Saint-Germain who've been in the Champions League final twice in the last few years. Right, so a couple of ex-United players, you might have heard of them, Jackie Groenen and, I don't know, some goalkeeper who doesn't like getting dropped. Mm-hmm. Fucking hell, what a child. We haven't talked about this on the pod before. I couldn't believe it. I mean, look in the mirror, Mary. Fucking hell, you haven't done yourself any favours. Anyway, United played a bit of a shock. The team. I mean, obviously there were some injuries, so they had to juggle things around at the back, and a late injury to Fallon Gillis Toyce. Let's just butcher her name as well. Meant that Middleton was in goal. Middleton, Patel, and Eltoon was out of the team. And so, juggled things around after having lost to Aston Villa at the weekend, having also juggled things around then. And I think there was kind of a bit of a negative mood at kickoff amongst the fans. Yeah. Anyway, I mean, hope and all of that kind of stuff. But, a lot of reaction online was negative. And then just a fucking great performance from the team. I mean, brilliant goal to start from Mallard, and then conceded right on half time. I mean, that was a great goal as well, right in the top corner, and a great header from Rolfo to win it. What was your reaction?
All good, clean goals as well, especially the winner. Very nice and clean. Similar in execution to Mbeumo's at the weekend, the way that it's headed in. Yeah, it was a strange one. I was down at the ground before the game. I wasn't going in, but I've seen some people, some friends down there. One thing that struck me over the last 2 years is, this is going to mean nothing to anyone, but the cuts around Old Trafford have become severe enough that I don't know how much I should really say this, but the security people who are usually there on the Old Trafford East Stand car park, they're no longer there. Well, they are there, but they're not there usually. They're there for match days or coming into close to kickoff, but generally they're not there anymore. And they don't do a search, but when it's match days, they usually do. And we went down to Hotel Football to see some friends who were going to the game at, let's say we were there maybe at 3:15, so kickoff's 8:00.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I mean, this is the first European night at Old Trafford, right? And I know, it was 15,000 there, so you're not expecting a big crowd, but you and I will have both been to stadiums where there's 15,000 people, and it was probably even less buzz than that close to kickoff. It just seemed like a regular day when I was there, and when I was leaving was probably about 4:45. So the feel around the place didn't feel like a big European night. But obviously, I wasn't going to the game, so that's the first thing. The relative material things about the team and the performance. Now, the worrying thing about Villa is that they've had a good record over Villa in the past, and that was the first game was against Villa where they knocked 12 past them or something. So they've always seem to have the Indian sign over them, and I don't know sometimes if it is a sign of progression. This is going to sound like a weird thing, but when you've had a good record against a team and then you stumble against them when you've been playing so well, a sign of progression that I'm not saying that this was the case on Sunday because or the weekend, because I don't believe that, but sometimes a team can get too complacent. I don't think that United have been that good that they would ever be like that at this moment in time, but I don't think it's a bad thing in the development. So have this team that you've had the Indian sign over suddenly step up and show resolve. But it was still a tricky performance and result to go into that kind of gaming on the back of. So I will say it was just fantastic, wasn't it? I mean, I think there are certain things that I like about the women's team I was having this conversation yesterday before kickoff, so it's funny that we're talking about it now. The two things that I love about United history. The first thing is that there's this ability to contrive things to the narrative thread all the way through history. If you want to tell stories like that,
the story.
And that I always do that. I always say, oh, well, that has relevance today because of something that happened in 1963. And you can do that with the women's team as well. Look, Ella Toon, homegrown kid, wearing number 7, scores a screamer in the cup final. How would you not want to attach that to the narrative history of everything that United are and represent? But there are certain
200th game for her last night. She got presented with a shirt before the game, and then was promptly out of the team.
Well, it happens like that. That's life. But the point being that there is this attachment that you can't get away from because the name is Manchester United. But there are certain things that aren't part of the women's team history, and one of them is obviously they can't attach themselves. It is part of the club's linear history. But their history isn't really the Munich thread of the history. their history is the struggle in the 90s when they had a local team that was attaching themselves to the name of Manchester United.
Yeah.
And the battle that they went through to become established throughout the 2000s, the 2010s, that's their history. And I'm trying to be careful the way that I say this, because I'm not trying to I'm actually trying to build that up to be its own thing and worthy of its own integrity, to get to the point where last night, when I might have felt, you know what, this doesn't feel like a big European night. And it shouldn't, because it wasn't the men's team. It was the women making their own stand in their own way. And I didn't go to the match. So I am, kind of way I'm part of that problem anyway. Even though, full disclosure, I had a 5-month-old baby with me and she's not ready to go. She would probably shout with the old stadium down anyway. But the point being that they're making their own history. And much as I like to romanticize the attachment to the linear, complete history of United, I think it's such an incredible thing what they're doing. So to do what they did last night, to the biggest game in the history of the women's team, we all like to say, in the FA Youth Cup had the final, a crowd of like 50,000, but that's got a much more established history that as a thread that connects back to the 50s with the club and even further back than that. Whereas the women's team is still growing its audience. So I think all things considered, I shouldn't be prefacing everything that I'm saying with the feeling of it being underwhelming. I want to try and build it up, because I think it was an incredible performance, even better result, great goals to mark the occasion, and it's a night of, when especially coming after the back of the weekend, one of those things that's universally positive. And when something like that happens, you want to sort of crystallize it, don't you? You want to catch it, lightning in a bottle, and you want to catch that moment.
Absolutely. I mean, the weekend was a disappointing result for them because it's a team they should beat, that they're better than, and they were very flat and they just didn't create any chances. And also because there aren't that many games in the WSL, 22 games, which means points, with there being 4 teams chasing 3 places in next season's Champions League. I know you want to focus on the here and now, of course, but you're always thinking about progression and development. Then drop points are really important, and women play City at the weekend as well, right? Yeah. So every point's really, so dropping any points could be really crucial. But back to the Champions League, I mean, I think 15,000 is a perfectly good crowd. It's more than they could have got in Lee Sports Village. They'd have probably got a much better atmosphere at Lee. I mean, they definitely would have. But they're trying to build the audience, and that does mean getting more casual fans involved, other than the hardcore base of support. And I've had Andy from the Barmy Article fanzine on here a few times. He talks about it, how it's really important to just build up that support the core base. They like Lee because it's the right sized for the fan base right now, but they also have to find ways to build it outside of just Lionesses type stuff, which was the early sort of Earps tune thing. So I think it's fine. I mean, United women are 5 years behind Arsenal and Chelsea or more, right, in terms of the development of their audience. Chelsea don't even get particularly good crowds. Arsenal do. When they play at the Emirates, they've had 50, 60,000 quite a few times now. Barcelona Feminine have had 100,000 at Camp Nou. But United women are not there yet, and they had 20 years without a team at all, and before that, not really a professional team. So, put it in context, this was just a great night.
Also, you need the sense of occasion, and that's what the stadium allowed. So, with all things considered, you're absolutely right. I mean, I understood the way that was leading into that made it sound like it was underwhelming, and it's difficult because I'm just trying to paint the context of what it was like before the match. And it was like that. I can't get away from that. But everything else, if you're watching it on television, broadcast around the world, and people seeing the pitches on television, that's a massive statement. It's a really good thing. And, you mentioned about Earps. I love all that stuff as well. Storytelling, particularly someone who ghostwrites. It's funny because this is why current players rarely write books, because of the propensity for things like this to happen. And it just so happened that, United were drawn against them. They're playing against them in this big game, and she's got to go back home basically to play against her team. Look, I get what you're saying. There's been a lot of controversy around it. She's come out and quite outspoken. A lot of things being put in the press, and I don't know. I feel like at the time, it's more or less, like people going about the Wayne Rooney. This is a different kettle of fish, but people understand where I'm going with it. Because the Wayne Rooney things come out in the press again recently, I think some people are going, "Oh, he's criticised the transfer policy and he did that when he put in a transfer request and blah 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 blah." And I do remember at the time, wrote articles about it and everything.
It was proven to be right, Wayne Rooney.
But the point was everyone, all the support. We didn't like that Rooney said it, but everyone was saying the same kind of thing at the time.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not saying that. The point I'm making about Mary Earps is that everyone's been saying that there's issues at United for a long time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You should get things in gear and everything like that. So it just stings. Like when it's one of your own, and we still considered her to be one of our own because in the way that we didn't want her to go in the first place.
Yeah.
But then she did, and all the stuff that comes out. I mean, but there's nothing sweeter than getting a win over an ex-player.
Over an ex-player, yeah. Yeah, no, I think it apparently is more like a kind of self-help book and diary than a pure autobiography. I haven't read it, so I've only seen the quotes in the press. Those particular quotes in her interviews afterwards, sort of defending it or promoting it. I don't think she's done really well. She does come across as a bit immature. I know it's hard. Like, if you've been a great player and a great side, as England women were, and you've won trophies and made big finals and been a real part of the narrative and all of that kind of stuff, it's hard to lose that status as an elite sports person. We've seen lots of people melt down. She just did it in this really public, kind of graceless way. And behind the scenes, it sounds like she didn't get on with Serena Wegman either, right? And that's part of it, the breakdown in the relationship. But yeah, anyway, it's all a good story, isn't it? But look, it's great for United Women. This is just a cliche statement win. They're up to third in the Swiss league format. They've got 16 teams. It's a bit smaller than the men's, but it means they'll play 6 games. They've won all 3 of their games so far. Excellent record overall this season. That's why Villa was a shock, really. They are defensively really good. A lot of it is down to Tullis Joyce, who's the keeper of the year. She was brilliant last year as well. And her injury, we'll see whether that affects them and how long she's out for. But it's a great moment of progression, and little by little they're increasing their audience and exposure. And I've talked about this on the pod before. It's right there, right? And the disappointment I have in the club not really supporting the women's team in the same way, right? Because it just doesn't take much money. United's budget is about £9 million. Yeah, you could put 2 million in there, and it'd be absolutely transformational in terms of the players they could attract and the facilities they could have and their professionalism around that women's team. And it's just not supported through the infrastructure of the club in quite the same way. And so they made a strategic choice to sort out the men's team, which obviously has a much bigger impact on the overall finances of the club. We understand that. But women's football is growing, women's sport is growing financially and in terms of the audience. And if you watched the game last night, you'd have seen a really high quality game, just like brilliant sport, right?
Yeah.
Great stories, really high quality entertainment. And, revenue coming into the WSL has doubled in the last 3 years, basically. And it's just growing really fast. So there's opportunity there for Manchester United as a whole, to grow the whole club. And I feel it's a bit short-sighted. But there's been cuts all over the club, so it's not just this area, but it feels a bit like an afterthought, and that's a bit disappointing. Omar Barada has tried to change that narrative a little bit, but until there's kind of real money put into it, that is not really going to change. But anyway, that sounds negative. Last night was fantastic. Really enjoyed it, and they're doing brilliantly, and they're in a great position to qualify for the knockout rounds.
Yeah,
in their first Champions League proper, really.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to do Mailbag Pod and take a few questions, as usual, a few fun ones. All right. Richard asked, it feels like we're hanging on with this midfield. If Casemiro gets injured, are we in real trouble? And do we need a midfielder in January, even if it's just a loan? Yeah, a bit of discussion about potentially Connor Gallagher coming in on loan and Mainoo coming out. That'd be such an Amorim move, that would. He'd just have the runners in there. Because that's what he's a very limited footballer, but he runs around a lot. Casemiro's, it's a real problem if he gets injured because you've seen the stat, right? We've conceded 5 goals with him on the pitch and 15 with him off the pitch, and it just seems to completely fall apart when he leaves. It's a massive renaissance. I mean, people on social media have picked out like times I've had to go at Casemiro. Social media snark doesn't always age well, does it? I think I wrote at one point that we should send him to the glue factory. Bit cruel. I mean, look, a year ago, remember that game he played with Eriksen in midfield, and we got absolutely battered against Newcastle to be like 6-0 at half time, and you just like, this guy's gone. And so the renaissance in Casemiro since then has been incredible. They've used him very sensibly, right? They've changed his role. He doesn't have to do any counter pressing, and he comes after 60 minutes or so. And he's only playing a game a week, and that's obviously really helped him physically. But he has been brilliant this season. And to the question, we'd be in real trouble if he was injured.
And when he's not on the pitch, we are. It's a good point. And I did wonder on Saturday, is what we're losing with a half-fit Casemiro better or worse than having a fully fit Ugarte on the pitch at this point? Would he have the wherewithal to not make the same kind of mistakes on the ball, even if he's tired, even if he's knackered? And like you said there, he's being asked to do certain things. And that, in a roundabout way, brings me back to the point about Kobe, because if you're just asking players to do things that are outside the comfort zone, why are you not asking Kobe of that when he's got all the raw elements of both of those players? Nowhere near the defensive sensibilities of Casemiro. And if that's what you prefer, then fair enough, stick with him. But if you're going to replace him with anyone, I know he couldn't do it on Saturday, but the prevailing point is there. Why not ask Kobe to do it? Now, Conor Gallagher is a sensible one, but we've still got a month and a half until we get there. And the point is what if Casemiro gets injured? The point is, if Casemiro does get injured, it'll be a catastrophe. And you remember going back further than that, because you're quite right, Casemiro and Eriksen against Newcastle was very bad. Going back further than that, we played Palace and Carragher went out and said the football's left him. And he might have even said it before that, but then he cycled the quote for that game. And I came on this podcast and I was like saying it's very dangerous for an ex-pro to be talking about players like that. I said it at the time, even though I was saying, all right, fair enough, it might be time for Casemiro to move on. But to talk about players like that is very dangerous to do that, because it just is. I don't. But there's undertones behind it I don't like, because you can't just. We couldn't anyway. United couldn't,
especially from Carragher, who disappears every time Liverpool lose. I mean, it's just hilarious how he's not around. He's like goes on holiday or fishing or something.
His latest one is I don't know if this is true. I've just seen it doing the rounds on Twitter that Guardiola has already surpassed the legacy of Sir Alex Ferguson in England.
Come on,
which I don't know. Yeah, some things are said to rile, but the one about Casemiro, you could see that he meant it and that he's been trying to do that, but he hasn't stepped back on that at any point. He's never come back and said, like, he shouldn't have said something like that about a player who has played at the top level and won the things that Casemiro has won.
Casemiro has more Champions League medals than Carragher scored goals in his entire career.
Yeah, well, and that's true even if you add the goals that he scored for Manchester United in there, Carragher.
Yeah, he got a few.
So it probably is. I don't know what's Carragher's number, is it 2? If he gets to 4. But yeah, anyway, the point being that he shouldn't have said that. Now we're in a position where we've relied on him and he's done a decent job there. There's still not an effective partnership, Casemiro and Fernandes. They've done all right as individuals, but not as a partnership. Now, at the moment, they're treading water and we're quite happy with how they're treading water. But if you put Ugarte in there, we've already spoke this season about the limitations that he's got. You put Kobe in there, I don't know if that's asking for trouble at this point for various reasons. But
I mean, my view on Kobe, obviously I'm a big Kobe fan, and some people don't like that. It's funny how people get really wound up with talk of that, or Marcus Rashford, or Jesse Lingard, or Anthony Martial, or Paul Pogba. I don't know what it is about that, but yeah. Try defending Kobe on the internet and see what you get back. I think it'd be easier. I mean, he's a link player in a 3-man midfield. If you had a destroyer, a link, and the creative one, that would be the right balance. He tends towards the left-hand side, just natural instincts, I think, of a three-man. But linking build-up play, Amorim doesn't want to do build-up play.
No, but
so it's one touch, two touch, get it forward. That's what he said. It'd be easier to convert Kobe to a number 6, even in an emergency, than it would be to convert Ugarte to a ball progressor. 100%. Ugarte can't do it.
No, but let me just jump in on the point there, because what we're actually saying is, all he's said all along is that these players can't play in these positions because they want specialist qualities from them. But then whenever he talks about the players that have come in, he's forced to talk about the compromise that he's had to make. So you can't both things don't go together. You've had to make a compromise to put the player in the system. And when you're doing that, you might as well just put the player with the more all-round attributes who's better suited to, for multiple reasons, either the game that you're trying to play overall or the future of the football club. And that's obviously Kobe. If you can't build a team around the midfield, and this is diverting massively away from the point, from the question that was asked, but this is why it would be a catastrophe, is because he won't go back to Kobe. If Kobe's fit after the international break and Casemiro's injured, he'll go to Ugarte. And Ugarte and Fernandes, it will be a disaster. It will be a disaster. We've seen, I'm the most, and I try to be the most optimistic United fan, to the point where, you start the season out and you go, well, there's still 38 games to play. We've still got a chance of getting into to win the league. We've still got a chance to get into Champions League. Until it's mathematically ridiculous to talk about it, I still have the optimism that we'll go on this ridiculous run and do that. But we've seen over the last 2 years the reality of what this United team are. And the reality is sobering, difficult performances and results. Now, you're not going to expect miracles from... So if Casemiro, and by the way, he's already not the perfect fit, but he's doing well as an individual. He's doing well in that system. And this is why, if he gets injured and Kobe won't come in, this is a disaster waiting to happen, because the manager's already said, I can't do anything with the rest of these. I can't tell them to do things. I can't manage these players into short-term solutions. So this is going to be a problem for this period of time. And that is concerning. It is concerning. Yeah,
it's a limitation in the manager as well, that we've seen some adaptation from him this season, but the major adaptation in possession is get it forward very quickly. They've adapted that for each fixture, and I give him credit for that. Right, he's trying to find solutions, and for 6 months he wouldn't do that. He was like, my way or the highway. You want to change the system, you change the man. Right. So he's made a few little adaptations. Sometimes it's very, very long. Against Liverpool, 40% long balls. Against Forest, it was under 15%. But it's all very direct. And it's done two things. It's kind of avoiding the central midfield build-up, because we can't do it, right? If it gets into central midfield, it's get it forward as quick as possible. Both Casemiro and Fernandes are pretty good at that. Sometimes scattergun, but they progress the ball. And it's compromised the overloads in the wing-back wide 10 areas, which was a real hallmark of the Sporting sides, and we just don't see that anymore because the ball's going forward into the front three so quickly. The other adaptation was the change in the pressing format from the sort of suicidal 5-2-3. As soon as the press was beaten, we were in real trouble, to more of a 4-4-2 block. And it's just made us a bit more solid. There's a question later about why we're conceding goals. I have some thoughts on it, but he's adapted, but he won't adapt as profile of players he believes are right? Which, if I'm Kobe, I'm thinking I've got no chance of having a time at this club, right? Even if Fernandes goes, he'll want a different style of player, ball progressor than Kobe, I think. So there'll be pressure to go buy that player. Flavour of the month is Elliot Anderson. He does progress the ball very well from a number 6 position. He would be a very good purchase for United. It doesn't take an awful lot of insight to say that. I think he's been the best midfielder in the country alongside Bruno Fernandes, I think, this season. But he's just not... I don't see Kobe having a future while Amorim is at the club, and I'm sure Kobe is smart enough and his people are smart enough to go, you don't have a future here. He's just not going to turn into Bruno Fernandes, ball progressing, 50 times a game. Anyway, let's move on. Unless you've got a final point.
I do. Just very quickly on that.
Yeah.
And I know it's not a question. I've not seen it in the questions that was asked on social. So this is the concern for me, because Yeah, I would say all sensible things around Kobe would say get out now, and sensible for the club because get out while his value's as high as it can be, which would break my heart, and also makes a mockery of Amorim. And I've said this elsewhere, that Amorim coming out before the game on Saturday saying that record's bulletproof under him. I think it's a really dangerous thing to say because the record stands for something different than just having a player in the team.
Yeah.
And I think if you do that, and
it's pointless. Honestly, it's not Jack Fletcher's fault, but it was tokenism. And by the way, I was looking at the CIES data, the sports data group, and they do an annual ranking of clubs throughout Europe who produce the most academy players and get them into professional football, right? And it's not just into their own first team squad, it's wider than that, right? Players who make it into professional leagues, the big professional leagues. And they rank it big top 5 and then other, basically. United always used to be really high on that list. We were producing players. And I think we're still in the period of the fallout from the underinvestment in that youth team.
Yeah.
Now, it changed with Nick Cox. And we've got anyone who's watched the age group teams at United now can see there are half a dozen really high quality players in there. Doesn't mean they're going to make it as professional footballers because so much happens, but lots of high quality players. But we're at the back end of the kind of period of starvation, and we dropped out of the top 20 in that list of producing players. And this is a wider point than the record of having players in a matchday squad, because I think it was effectively broken at the weekend, and it's been broken because we sold off a bunch of our... I mean, Jack Fletcher was there, but clearly Amorim said it. He was there because not to break the record, right? So it's kind of meaningless at this point. And the real thing you want to look at is how much that academy is producing, and it's not produced enough. And that is the club's fault for starving it of funds and attention for a decade.
And also for roadblocking with average foreign players, but also Premier League players as well, but mostly Matteo Darmian, Marcus Rojo, Eric Bailly, all these players.
A bunch of shite, yeah.
The Youth Cup winners should have had more players coming through into the team, just to be given a chance. Carreras, who's gone to Real Madrid and doing great things. We had this dialogue on his podcast, and everyone was saying in the comments, he's too lightweight. Well, we're still seeing him be bullied for 12 games, then Reguilon's 12 games. We didn't see that, and that's where the departure has been, really. And people can go back and say that Ten Hag Graham was usually contributing to this, but at least Garnacho and Mainoo were in the side and they were scoring in the cup final. I'm not saying that that's justification for a lot of crap that we've seen elsewhere and dubious transfer policy, but what I'm saying is that the connective thread was still there and the chances were still, even though I'm making the point that under his tenure and Van Gaal's and Mourinho's, not so much Ole, but under those managers, the record was less important about the integrity of the record, basically, like we're talking about on Saturday. The integrity of the record wasn't being respected on Saturday, and for all intents and purposes, for me, I feel like it was thrown in the bin. So he came out and said it was bulletproof before the game, and I thought, no, that's not the right thing to say.
He thought he was saying the right message, but it was totally the opposite.
Yeah,
in my view. Yeah. He was saying it's just records for the record's sake are just pointless. Anyway, Sensible Red says he's kind of sensible. He's got a Substack as well. You want to check that one out. With talk of Xerxes being off in January, can we really afford to go into the new year with only one recognised striker? Sesko's injury hasn't hurt us too much because of the international break, but we might not be that lucky next time. Talking of Substack, I wrote my piece back in September, and it was like, imagine a scenario he hobbles off in January. Just how fucked would we be? Very is the question. Because, like, Amorim said it himself. He said we're a better team with Ben in there. And I think that is true. We very much are a better team with him in there because there's a focal point to the attack, especially if you're going to go direct. It doesn't mean we're launching it long to him and he's making headers, although occasionally that's the case. But it's more like there's someone to knit it all together. And I feel like that doesn't quite happen when we play with the false nine. Don't create chances, for example, basically. So, I mean, I would say this before. I think the price is there. It's such an open league this year, like 3rd to 8th, all of a very similar quality. And it's going to be, I mean, if you project it out, it could be 2, 3, 4 points between not Europe and Champions League.
Yeah.
And so going, hey, we can afford it. Got money, PSR headroom. The only issue is cash. Like, would we like to add another striker or another midfielder or maybe a wingback in January? Anyway, massive risk. And Xerxes not a striker anyway. Thoughts on the question?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I don't think he's the answer either way, so I wouldn't stop it. I wouldn't stop him moving on if it brought in some cash, for example. I don't think that the first solution is not really a bad one because Cunha's played all right through the middle. And I think if I'm imagining a scenario, it hasn't happened so far because when he's played Cunha through the middle, he's put Ahmad and Mbeumo in the tens. But imagine a scenario where he continues with Ahmad on the right wing back in let's say for the sake of argument, just for the hypothetical point of the question, that Cunha's out for the next Sesko's out for the next 3 or 4 games, and it's a fairly comfortable run of games, so he might be bold enough to play Ahmad and Mbeumo on the right hand side. Imagine a scenario where he puts Cunha through the middle, pushes Bruno back into the 10 and gives Kobe that chance in the area that he's gate kept for Bruno. Is that the worst case scenario? I don't think it's a bad plan B, and it might actually open Ruben's eyes to different ways of playing, like a dynamic way of having Kobe in the side. So I don't think...
Yep.
I'm not wishing... I want Šeško to be back after the break. Don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is that my plan B still wouldn't include Xerxes. And if I'm looking for a plan C should be where Obi comes in, really. That's where the kids are supposed to come in. And that's where, to the last point that we're making, where the average foreign players or the average any player in the team, the average squad players come in. Luke Shaw's another example. I don't want to say...
All right, Nige.
Yeah, no.
Foreigners taking our jobs now, women.
I felt like I was going down that route then. So Luke Shaw's another example as well. Or Luke Shaw, for example, blocking Aiden Evan.
Yeah.
Just give Aiden Evan the run of games at this point.
Yeah.
So,
well, I tell you what, because we got a question on Patrick Dorgu later, so we'll get to this in more depth. But I'd be tempted to. I know his body might break. Move Luke Shaw to left wing back and Hayden to the. I know, but it's funny. He's not in the England squad. England don't have a left back. He's playing all right. Luke Shaw is.
No, he's not playing bad. But what I'm saying is,
he's playing all right.
I'm not saying he's playing bad, and Xerxes not played terribly when he's played the season in the 10.
But it just doesn't fit. I would sell him, and I'm sure he's a nice guy, Josh, and he does have many qualities. I cannot see him ever being dynamic enough up front to get in the right positions to score goals. We just know he's just not that player. He's a shadow striker, but he doesn't drop into midfield comfortably enough to support in the way that number 10 needs to do. The reason why I don't love Cunha up front is he's tried that a couple of times in his career. It's never really worked. He scores more goals and creates more when he's in the deeper role, and he's very good at dropping in between the lines and running with the ball, and he can't really do that up front. I'd be tempted either to move Bruno forward, as you said, and Kobe into midfield. I don't think that's very likely, or to play Mbeumo through the middle and to find other solutions because of the pace that he's got. But anyway, Grimoire. Why are we conceding so many goals? Individually, the centre-backs look fine. The keeper looks fine. So where's the leak? I saw the Casemiro stat we mentioned earlier. The wing-backs, what's going on? I think we have a problem when... So go back and look at all the goals we conceded. We have a specific problem where teams attack the corners of our box, right? The spacing behind the wing-backs into the channel. And I'm not quite sure either when it's getting better, right? If you look at the press in the defensive third, when the wide centre-backs have to jump into midfield to either help the build-up through that midfield or to support that midfield when they're outnumbered, right? So it has been getting better, but I think they have a particular problem in those spaces.
Yeah.
That's part of the reason why we can see. And also just stupid individual errors, a couple of goalkeeper errors early in the season, not marking against Spurs, one of the goals where I counted the players, had 6 players in the box and they had 1 and they still managed to score. I mean, it was a brilliant goal from Tel, but still. So I think there's some individual errors, but also some tactical issues too.
Yeah. If you go prior to Amrin taking the job, one of the key features was this team conceded so many shots. It was the record. It was going like over 20 a game, wasn't it? I mean, was it a run a game where it was something maybe like 30 games in a row where something like that. It is a very high number of like conceding over 20 shots in a game. And that did get solved for a long time under Amorim. I think systemically it's a nice shape to stop that happening, because that's what seemed to be the case for the first sort of half season. Even when the results weren't great, we were still stopping the shots being as which I think as he's tried to get bolder with the new attackers in the system, and he's trying to create the overloads and sort of create the combinations and partnerships there. Obviously, some work and some don't. And I think where we're also finding out about his in-game management isn't always the best, because his substitutions seem to be pre-planned rather than reading the pace of the game. You know, like Fergie used to say, smell the game, smell the pace and tempo of the game. Amorim doesn't really do that. And I don't know if sometimes I like that as a quality, because it's a bit colder and he's saying, no, I'll make the decisions my way. But he's cost us in the games. This season, he's cost us in more games than it hasn't, because he's just not read the game right. And my point about this is, for example, against Forest, we could audibly hear Sean Dyche shouting it on the television screen. Millions of people watching that game around the world, hearing him shouting, get Ahmad. And they were getting Ahmad, and they were getting crosses in, and they were getting shots in. And he's so basic and so rudimentary. And that's where they got one of the goals from. I think both their goals eventually, no, at least one of them came from that position. And against Spurs, the weird thing about that was and not to go over the game, but just to make the point about how easily the flow of a game can change and all the shots come in, because Spurs weren't getting anything in at all. In fact, the Mbumo shot was the only shot on target in the first half by either side. So United were well in control of that. And the only thing that could have changed that is the double axis, which both managers executed at the right time. And United were in no real rush to have to make the change. Spurs could only really have an impetus by bringing on Udogie to exploit the space behind the fullback if United chose to bring on Ahmad, and to bring off Mazraoui and play that role where Ahmad was exposed. And they did that, and so they were shooting themselves in the foot. And so because they did that, and it was such a basic tactical error, that they just got loads and loads of shots and lots of crossing. And I think sometimes they are as basic as that, because you look at the other combinations as well. He's pushed Bruno back into midfield, so he's definitely playing him there this season. And where Bruno, his numbers aren't suffering really statistically, but defensively, he's still not strong enough to all that. And Casemiro's an individual. We've already given him his plaudits, but as a combination, it's not working. So if you've got those areas of the pitches where you've got like 3 or 4 players on one side and 3 or 4 players on another, they're not really working in combination within that 4 or 3 or with each other. You've just got too many porous holes in there, and I think that's all it is at the moment. And I've got confidence that will get better, but that's where Amorim needs to step in, because first of all, his actual team selection isn't strong enough to stop that, because we've seen that the evidence is there, and his in-game reading actually invites, in a strange way, and I've praised him and criticised him for this on this podcast. I like the fact that he's gone out there and said, no, we're going to impose our game on every single match that we've played. So you can't criticise him for that. And what he did on Saturday was like, if I'll try and read this and go like, actually, they're coming back into the game, so we'll go more attacking and try and turn them over. And it just didn't work out. It shot ourselves in the foot. And I think hopefully it's a trend that will stop. But he has to do better within the selection and the in-game management to stop that.
He really does have a problem with the fullbacks. Yeah. Coming back to the question, but just generally, like the wingbacks, they are I think I've said this before. I think they're the really only specialists, but actually the central midfield have to be particular profiles of player to make it work as well. But they have to do so much. They have to invert in the build-up. They have to provide the overload on the wide spaces outside of the 10s. They have to drop into a back 5 when we're defending. They have to do an awful lot of work. And there's no perfect player. We know Ahmad's brilliant going forward and creative. Create Bruno Mbumo's goal, for example, last time out. But we know he has weaknesses defending. It's not his game, really, as a forward. Mazraoui or Dalot offer almost nothing going forward. Dorgu is really struggling I think. Less defensively than his... the headline numbers with Dorgu, 1 assist in 32 games or whatever it is. The underlying numbers are really, really bad, right? He's in the bottom 10 or 20% on almost every attacking metric for fullbacks. He's just offering nothing at all, except for ball carrying. World class, 95th percentile for ball carrying.
He gets into amazing areas and he can carry the ball. It's just everything else.
Yeah, I know. It's like I look at that and go, raw ingredients today. If we could just add this little bit of final third quality, you know. I know it's really basic, and I know it doesn't work like this, but bloody hell, they should have him like putting 1,000 crosses a week, you know, until he gets it right. Gary Neville, who I think has become a parody of himself in some circumstances, but he was not good on the ball early part of his career. And he said he just worked at it. And maybe this is too simplistic to say, but shouldn't Patrick Dorgu be doing the same thing until he's good at it or better at it, at least? Because it's going to really hinder his career otherwise. Yeah. He can't be a wingback in this system and offer nothing in the final third. Pete says, have we turned a corner? Performances look better recently. He's got another few questions in here, but let's go for that one. What do you think? We turned a corner?
Too early to say. We look better. But where I am at the moment, very briefly, is that draws are momentum setters. We've seen positives and negatives. So maybe the next 5 games will tell us more. I'm not sitting on the fence with it. I think it's a sitting on the fence kind of question. It's way too early. And even if we'd have won all our last 5 games, I would have still said it's too early because we haven't had a run for as long as that lad's cut his hair, and longer than that. It goes back years, doesn't it, before that? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's too early to say. I mean, I'm looking for the positives. I'm aware that I've been very critical of the manager already in this podcast. But I do see signs that we're getting there, and that's what we do as fans, right? You look at the positives and you go, right, okay, this is where we want to invest all our hope and expectations, but I just think it's a bit too early.
Yeah, I think that is fair. I think he's being pragmatic at the moment. Sometimes that borders on conservative, you know, playing 2 fullbacks in the wingback areas just makes it a flat back 5, honestly. And I think the long ball stuff is pragmatic to get something out of these forwards, especially in Bumo, and that's working. It's not sustainable for a team that's challenging near the top or doing well in Europe, in my view. But that's down the line, isn't it? And for now, he's kept his job by getting some good results. But that's as far as it's got so far. The next 5 or 6 games, though, leading up to Christmas, are not bad. Leading up to the City game, it's a good run of winnable games against some teams who aren't playing very well. It's a good test, isn't it? Because if we don't come through that with a lot of points. If we come through that with a lot of points, we'll be right up there near the top 4 and looking at Europe as, you know, some kind of Europe has to be the benchmark this season, but we'll be looking at proper Europe, Champions League, and go, that's really there. The prize is there. Yeah. If we next 6 games, we drop a bunch of points against mediocre sides because we can't win games when we've got the ball. I mean, the record of points per game, I think it's 1.8 per game when we have less than 50% possession under Amorim, and 0.8 per game, points per game, when we have more than 50% possession. That's worrying when you're playing a lot of crap teams who might give us the ball and don't press. Ollie said it on the overlap. Yeah. He said you really need the teams to press you in this system, because if they don't, you struggle to build up. And I think he's right, and that's where we struggle.
And also that systems in football are, you know, the time immemorial with it, because they've always existed in the same kind of ways. I mean, since the 60s and 70s, since we moved to 4-man defences, those kind of things where you move to a 3-man defence, all those kind of things have been pretty much set in stone for 65 years. It's just how you operate the overloads within them, and that's where the innovation comes in. There's no real innovation in the shapes anymore. No one's going like 2 defenders and 7 attackers, or 7 defenders.
That'd be fun, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, Spurs tried it in '94, didn't they, with like the Klinsmann and Dumitrescu and all that.
His side, yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair, Ange tried it in a few games. Didn't work very well for him.
No, but so the point really that I'm making there is, I don't really know the point I'm making, other than, you know, those are remind me of the question. Where was I going?
Have we turned the corner? Performances look better recently.
Yeah. So I was going down there. You got me. I got swept away in Spurs nostalgia. Then I was like thinking, Darren. I was thinking of the 5 who played up front. Have we turned the corner? No, I can't. The issue that I've got with the broader point that you're making is that I agree in general, but then we were saying that before the last 2 games as well. Spurs and Forest were winnable games at their place, and they were vulnerable. They've had terrible home records this season, and that's the thing that concerns me a little bit there, going into those games moving forward. But, try and be optimistic about it.
Pete also says, seat licenses, how worried should we be? Some season ticket holders I know never filled in the survey and didn't even know about it. Well, check out the last United Inc. finance pod with Jamie. We went into some depth. Yeah. Actually, not the last one, the one before last. We went in some depth about seat licenses. I think the thing with that is the question is not about, is the concept bad? I mean, it's basically rinsing you twice for money. So yeah, it's bad. It's how it's applied, how many seats and in what areas. If it's for, I kind of feel like about that the same way I feel about like boxes when we were discussing that in the 1990s, right? Or exec seats. If it keeps prices down for everyone else, it's a good thing. If it's just owners rinsing everyone for as much money as possible because they want to take money out of the club, that's a bad thing. I think with Ratcliffe in charge, he's not taking money out of the club. That's not why he's doing it. He's doing it for legacy and vanity. And I think that's probably as good as you can get in it. Now, doesn't mean he's going to make good decisions at all. And so I'm not trying to defend some of the decisions that he's made. But I think the idea here is to extract as much money out of the people who are willing to pay a bit more as you can to keep either prices down for everyone or get the finances of the club in the kind of shape that we can spend it on the pitch.
Yeah. No, for me, I see a different kind of way. I feel like the way that these are worked, I'm going to say this is a good thing, but one thing that the Glazers did was keep prices relatively low because it would have been
after jacking them up. But
but I mean, for let's say post Ferguson, in a period when we've been rubbish, I know that they've put the prices up incrementally, but by and large, United's prices did stay quite low. So when
compared to the London side,
when Ratcliffe came out and he started talking about Fulham and everything, he had somewhat of a point. Now, the reason why that's a bad thing for United is because Ratcliffe can come in and say that kind of thing, and it's a very easy excuse to jack up the prices and escalate them very quickly. The problem that I have with those kind of questions and the way that they lead is that's really it's a line of the long-term thinking of what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen. This is a strategy that we've got in place, and it is going to happen whether you like it or not. Now, the speed of which we get there is going to be determined by the mutinous level of your response. Like the Super League won't happen at all if you're not that angry about this. So the surveys are there to monitor. And I'm not just saying Manchester United. I'm talking this is football in general and probably industry as a whole. When they talk about loyalty of customers and everything like that, how much can you get away on that pressure point of pushing the price up? That's going to happen. These things are going to happen. You better get ready for them. The Super League, in what some guys will eventually happen down the road,
basically has with the way the Champions League's formatted anyway.
Exactly, but the way that they want it from their side is going to go in, like the way that it gets monetized and the way that the clubs are forced to do certain things is going to become more aligned with the way that they were talking in the first place. It's just going to happen slowly and generally under that way. Whereas, and this is the same kind of thing, is that these are the things that will get enforced. You will have these licenses put in place and it is going to be unpalatable. I mean, the dialogue stops being reasonable when it, for example, and I'm one tiny, everyone who's been in the ground who's been moved, all those long timers who were moved for their VIP experiences, that already happened and they weren't strong enough percentage or a vocal enough percentage, even though they're there every match day with the big flags and everything like that in front, or they were last season when they were allowed to be, and they're still vocal and present when they can be. But it wasn't enough to stop them doing it. So it has to. So where the pressure point is between that angry old men. I'm sorry, angry old men, because I know a lot of you, and I love you all. You're absolutely
They'll
brilliant.
listen anyway.
Yeah. So 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 you've got a line between them and then the mutiny of what we've seen with stopping the Super League or the protests that we've seen in the past. And we've seen that there's a very high pressure point at United because of the fact that there have been visible protests before. These things will happen.
Visible protest is important, I think. Yeah. I mean, I am worried in that if I was a strategist for the club and I was looking at the pricing and I was looking at the global fan base, I would be thinking that we're leaving money on the table, right? Now, I'm not advocating for this, just to be clear. I'm saying this could be a way you'd think. They've left a lot of money on the table because if it was a completely open market, if it was variable pricing, you just left it up to the market to decide what the prices were, like the World Cup, and the prices are just shocking. So you would extract much more. And we can criticize the Glazers for jacking the prices up in the early days. The first 3 years, the Glazers like basically doubled the prices. Then they kept it flat. And for all that time, they've left a lot of money on the table, I think. Even with United being crap, they could go to a model like if you try to go to Camp Nou now, if you're not a socio, if you're a socio, you pay 30 euros or whatever it is. If you're a tourist, you'll pay 130 euros.
Yeah.
And they've just segmented it like that. They have realised, and so did Real Madrid, that there's a lot of money there to be extracted from people who are willing to pay an awful lot because it's an experience they're going for, right? They might not go to 30 games a season, they might go to one. And as a result, they're prepared to pay 2-3 times as much. And if you cap prices or you have them fixed in certain areas of the ground, then you're leaving all that money on the table. So I'm worried that they've gone down this road and they'll realize that dynamic pricing is the way to extract the most possible value, right, from the global fan base. And that's more important than having a lot of season ticket holders, because the thinking for most clubs was we want to have the most season ticket holders as possible because that brings money into the club early in the annual cycle.
Yeah.
In the summer when there isn't other income, and it's guaranteed income. Now, elite clubs are going, hang on a minute, we've got this global fan base and it's bad having all these season ticket holders because we can't extract a lot of money from tourists. They've done it at Liverpool. They've been reducing the amount of season ticket holders they have. With the expansion, it'll be the lowest percentage of the ground for decades, basically, at Liverpool. And I'm sure United looking at that and other grounds and going, there's money to be made there. He says, then finally, are you like me, sick of grifters profiting off us? Yeah, well, yeah, but I think what define the grifter? I mean, is it YouTube channels with people who invent narratives for the sake of anger? Or is it ex-players who are doing punditry and only sell grievance and they've got nothing else to say? I mean, could be either of those.
Yeah, I don't know. Do we qualify in that?
I don't know. I mean, one, we don't really make much money out of this. So it's like, we're not very good at the grifting you were doing the grifting.
No, yeah.
I always felt with this pod that, like, whoever it's been on the pod, that we're pretty analytical and reasonably fair. And, when social media can, like, distort the view because you say one thing during the game when you're emotional about conceding a goal.
Yeah.
And where you step back on the podcast, I think generally speaking, we've been really fair. My opinions, I think, change when the facts change.
Yeah.
But I'm sure with 20 years of doing this, people could call out stuff that I've said that's totally wrong. I don't know. I don't see us as grifters because I don't have an agenda. I just say kind of what I'm thinking. I think most people on the pod do that too.
Yeah, maybe I said it, was it last time or the time before I was on, that maybe I take my role and maybe I take our role too seriously, and I say I include you in that because you nearly collapsed when I put you in the same bracket as journalists and stuff like that. But the point I was making is that you've been part of the, all right, I'm not saying that you're Barney or Andy outside selling the fanzine, but you've been part of the fan culture and for over 15 years. So because of that, you're part of an established narrative where you're, I don't want to say authoritative, but trusted enough voice that people pay attention to what you're saying for a reason. So I think that when we talk about this question, turn the mirror on ourselves, because I'm saying, like, I make money from United because I sell books. United sell my books, so like, I'm definitely not clean of the grifter comment. I try I work very bloody hard, and I'm definitely not criticising for the sake of criticising, but I have to be self-aware enough to turn the mirror back on ourselves. And so when I say to you, like a couple of weeks ago, when we were talking about it, that we at least are self-aware enough to know that we're part of that same audience, and so we've got our own responsibility within that audience to say, no, all right, we'll call that out for what it is. Do you know what I mean? When it all exists and they go, no, they're trying to be virtuous and say, no, we're not saying this for our own narrative or our own agenda. Well, at least we can be self-aware enough to say that.
Yeah. But when I say, because grifting is, you're basically saying someone's a con artist. They're trying to, and there are certain YouTube channels, and the reason why I particularly dislike that channel, it's because it's predetermined, right? There's an editorial decision to create a story around the player that's almost universally negative, because it garners anger and attention. And anger and attention means eyeballs. The longer the eyeballs are on your video, the more money you make out of your share of the YouTube ad revenue. I don't think we do that. I think you can criticize what we say or our views. We got a lot of criticism from commenters after the Liverpool game for not being positive enough, can't win sometimes. I know that. Because I've been fairly critical of state-owned clubs, I've had a lot of people asking me why I haven't had a view on the recent war, which is still going on, by the way. And, my pushback on that has been, I keep it narrow to football. I have a view on that. I've told my local representatives, and I'm very conscious of what I say most of the time, for the reason that I have a platform. It's not the biggest platform in the world. We didn't modernize and go to video until relatively recently. The way that the algorithms have restricted off-platform views has kind of restricted our platform, I think. It's hard to grow now, and fan media has moved on in some aspects, but it's a reasonable platform. So I think for the most part, what I write on my Substack, what I tweet out mostly, although sometimes it is a bit, I didn't really want to send Casemiro to the glue factory, not literally. And what I say on here, I try to be reasonable and fair. Sometimes I get it wrong, People are very willing to point that out. But anyway, Chris asks, how feasible is it to win the league as part of Project 2028? This is Chris Etchingham, our resident Liverpool fan. So how you doing, Chris? Feeling all right at the moment? Arnie slot in or Arnie slot out? I'm slot in right now. He's doing a great job. And if it doesn't happen, has Barada set himself up for a big fail or fall? I'm not that optimistic about 2028. If I look at the current progress, I don't think 5 games of progress under Amorim means anything towards winning the league. There's probably 10 players that will change in the next 2 years, and we'll see after that and that takes us up to 2027, the beginning of 28. We'll see. If we get 9 of those 10 right in the transfer market, and Amorim is flexible enough to build the kind of team that could win the league, then we'll have a better idea.
Yeah, I'm more optimistic about that in the form of the league than I am of United. If United, last 2 weeks, they could have gone second with a win, and they were second, albeit temporarily in play, in both of those games. And at the start of this year, we were saying that this is the worst United team in existence, and the difference really is being Cunha and a Boomo and a goalkeeper that can stop the ball going in the net, which is clearly a revolutionary concept. So if we have a few more of those, like a defensive midfielder who can play as a defensive midfielder, and other players horses for courses, then I'm not going to say that I think we're only 2 players off a title challenge. I don't mean that, but what I mean is the steps for growth from 1 or 2 players can be exponential in ways that we can't envisage at the moment, as much as we can predict and say, oh, well, this is what we think. So I with you, I think 2028 would be very optimistic. Do I think failure to do it by 2028 is represents failure on Berardi's part. Well, probably does, because and Ratcliffe, because that's the project that they gave themselves, and that's a timescale that they gave themselves. So you can't say that it's not failure by the, you know what I mean? So that's their determined time span that they gave us.
Yeah.
So that's the one that's there. So yeah, you've got to say that. If it's failure, if United progress, if you look at Liverpool's own progress, it took Klopp 4 or 5 years to get them to be a properly organised team that played that kind. And I know they did it in a way that was like, it seemed like one season they were just completely relentless, and then the next season they seemed to tail off because they needed to get their energy back, and then they were amazing the next season after that. But it took him a long time to get there, and I think we're seeing signs of where we want Amorim to go, and I'm not convinced that we're going along that same road, because you dangerously go down that path saying, well, it took Ferguson 6 years, it took Klopp 3 or 4 years. I'm not convinced we're much closer. Like you said, I don't think 5 games of playing all right and getting all right results is enough of a strong sample size to convince me that we'll win the league by 2028. So I do think it would be fair to categorise it as failure. But if we are progressing to the point where, I don't like using Arsenal as an example because they've not won anything yet, but if we are where Arsenal are now in 2 years, where we're sustained challengers, then I think that would probably be on par for what I expect.
Sushant asks, is it possible for a manager to be successful after effectively giving up, like in the Grimsby game? I don't know if he gave up, but he looked broken, didn't he? Yeah, absolutely. He made some changes, and I do give him credit for rethinking some things. I think they're fairly minor. They're not the big picture. He's got a contract till 2027. It'll be interesting what happens next summer. Like, both, how can they get it right in the market? Because I think they've got it mostly right. Berardi, Wilcox, Ratcliffe, Ineos era. Apart from Ugarte, question marks over Dorgu, but he's very young and was pretty cheap. So it's mostly right. They do have to get a lot of these next couple of windows right as well. But he's only got that contract till 27. So next summer, where we finished this year, we have to finish in European places for budget planning. Either of Europa or Champions League, Conference League. So waste of time. It's horrible. It actually costs us. We'll probably lose money by qualifying for the Conference League. But do they give him a contract extension if we finish high enough up the league? Now, I don't know whether that's just because it's so tight. The difference between 5th place and a Champions League place and 7th and nothing could be like 3 or 4 points. Is that enough to judge a manager on? Like a game, a win here or there? It kind of feels like too fine a margin to go, that was good performance, Champions League, 66 points. That was a bad performance, Conference League, 63 points. It's one win, one goal, right? It's not really how to judge a manager. But if it's a measure of progress, and it's kind of financially we need it, European places is what it's at, and that might trigger some thinking around that contract extension or not.
Maybe. I would probably hazard a guess that Ratcliffe and Berardi and co are probably on the same line as what you're saying there, that they look at it black and white and say, well, it's 3 points. That's the margin. Rather than saying this is the black and white between Champions League and nothing. So I think that they'll be a lot more fair than what some fans might want them to be. But the point made in the question, it's an interesting one because Amorim went on record as saying, was it twice or once last season he offered his resignation?
Yeah, apparently twice. Yeah.
Twice. So and we know that he's performative. We know that he's very
emotional,
and he wears that outwardly, right? So this might have been guesswork. There was a lot of guesswork that went on after the Grimsby game, saying he was ready to walk before during the international break, that he was going to see out the Burnley game after that and then walk. And you could believe it. It was believable. And you could probably put safe money on him walking, but put safe money on an Athletic article in February or March saying that he was going to walk in September. I don't think that is
inside United's winter collapse.
Exactly, but I do believe that that's a fair point that was made there. Was he broken at that point? Maybe he was. Is it a good thing to have a manager who is so emotionally volatile? I'm not sure. Because remember the first few years, Fergie Fury all the time, and like people won't remember this because we are not in 1987 anymore, and they don't go back into newspapers like I do. But Fergie said a lot of similar stuff, not in like I was going to walk, I was going to quit or anything. Nothing quite as dramatic as that. You've also got to take into account the Latin temperament, the language difference, the way that the frustration comes across, the fact that he's so very young, all these kind of things taken into consideration. But Fergie would say things like, we were committing suicide. I don't even understand if these are Manchester United players that we've got. And he was saying this after games, when all these comments could be heard by everyone then. So the over-the-top statements that make you feel that a manager might well pack it in, I don't think you can dismiss them. I don't think you could dismiss this as well, because he did look, I agree, I think he looked broken, and I was genuinely of the mind that I believed he could have walked before the game after the international break. So my view now, to go back on what we're saying about long-term planning with Ferguson and Klopp and all that sort of stuff, is that, I think that it's a concern that he's so performative, so emotional, that it could count against him.
I don't think he regulates very well sometimes. He's trying to do it this season. I think you see him holding back in press conferences a little bit if you're sad enough to watch them. I am sad enough. That is. Mick says, with AFCON coming up and 3 important players gone, how worried should we be for matches like Newcastle? Yeah, it's a real problem, isn't it? Because there's no like-for-like. Mbumo, Mazraoui and Ahmad. That right-hand side is going to suffer somewhat, and every option is going to be a compromise of some kind.
Yeah,
I suspect he'll move Mason Mount into the front three, and we'll end up with Dalot at right back, and that'll be the solution, which is fairly suboptimal.
Yeah, and this is where the League Cup would have helped quite a lot. The likes of Shea Lacey to come in and plug one of those holes significantly. I wouldn't be surprised to see him get a few minutes on the bench. He was around the first team squad recently, and he's done very well since he's come back from injury. So I wouldn't be surprised. But obviously, if we had a longer run in the League Cup, he would have surely have seen some minutes from now. By now, it's very much a concern because they've been the Ahmad and Mbumo link up has been the best feature of the season so far. Mbumo has been the best player that we've had. He's been really good. It's a massive concern. Of course, it is. I don't know. Suboptimal is the very polite way of saying it's quite concerning. But Mount looked all right when he came on, albeit in the left 10. On Saturday, he's looked all right. He's looked like a passable squad player in this system, and that's what he will have to be. It's just a shame that's the problem with the strategic building of a squad when you've got such a combination area of the side. Again, I'm talking about combinations earlier. It's very poor planning to have like a complete area of that side. Even your backup, Mazraoui, the defensive backup in that area, like, they're all off, got one side of the...
Hey, it is what it is. I mean, we are thankful for Mbumo. He's been our best player this season, and he's a really high-quality player. And Ahmad's progress is... And we just look much better with him there. I mean, all the weaknesses we talked about in defence with him there are notable, but the strength of United's attack with that Mbumo and Ahmad combinations, and when Yoro's in the side as well and carries the ball really well, I think we're pretty strong in that area, and we're going to miss a couple of important legs of the stool there, sadly.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. I tell you what I really don't like with AFCON is some commentary around it. Why don't they just move it to the summer? Like, it should be built, African football should be built around European needs. Fuck off. I love AFCON, by the way.
Yeah.
It is great entertainment, and might distract from some crap United performances while we're missing some of our key players. We'll see. All right, let's finish on this question from Ollie, who says, what should January's priorities for Ruben be? Who should come in? Loans, buys, which players should we be looking at or moving on, loaning out? Why don't we do it as a prediction instead of answering the question? Because I feel we've answered it a little bit.
Yeah.
What do you think will happen in January? Give us a guess. We're holding you to this, Wayne.
Very little. Cobby will probably leave. That will free up some funds. We'll bring in a midfielder. My prediction would be Conor Gallagher on loan from Atletico Madrid, with probably an option rather than an obligation to buy, considering the financial situation. That gives the club an opportunity to go, well, if Conor does well when he comes in, then they can action that, or they can go all in for Belieber or Adam Wharton like they seem to want to. That would be my prediction. But then, of course, that's taking into account that the manager's still there, because we've seen the Glazers' dish of choice has been to fire the manager in November, bring in an interim or someone, and then not pay anything in January at all. So,
yeah. I mean, I think the double loan, Cobby loan out, and I mean, apparently, according to reports, Napoli are interested. We'll see Conte's still there because he's doing Conte-type things at the moment.
Oh, no. Napoli's one club interested. Have you not been reading the rumour mill? You want to have your heart broken. Like, so every club can't even speak the name. So you can imagine that different clubs have been linked to Cobby in the recent weeks and months. So which clubs would you expect to be mentioned? Just give me some clubs.
Spurs.
Yeah.
Napoli we've talked about.
Yeah. That's one.
Newcastle.
Yeah, they've been in. Yeah.
Atletico Madrid. Swap with Conor Gallagher. No. Who would need him? I think the good fit for him, I mean, I think he's got the potential to become an elite footballer. There's some parts of his game that he needs to progress in order. So it's one step down from the elite, I think, is where he would fit really well.
This week, Leeds and Everton have been linked to.
Oh, fuck off.
Yeah, exactly.
Fuck off.
Exactly.
He's way too good for that. If I was Cobby's camp, I'd say absolutely not. He needs to go to functional teams. He's a much better player than that. Much better. He started the Euro 24 final, right? The first time in history where two teenagers started the final, Lamine Yamal and Cobby Mainoo.
Yeah.
All right? He's a much better player than that. And if I was his camp, I'd say absolutely not to those.
And the point, just to close on this, is that if it's a Cobby podcast, it's a diversion away from the point, but it is related somewhat considering its January activity. If he was to go to I'm definitely not Leeds or Everton. I think there's just a lot of mischief making in the press. Mm-hmm. But if he was to go to a club, any club really, his stock has fallen. Everyone can say what they want about Garnacho, right? And they can say his behaviour, they can say his performances. Cobby Mainoo's stock has only fallen or is damaged entirely because of the manager. Nothing at all to do with the player. And if it is damaged, and if it is a club on the level of a Leeds or Everton who come offering, that ought to be taken as an alarm bell going off within the club. Not because of anything to do with the player, but because that's what the manager's done to the value of an incredible asset.
Yes, absolutely. And you can, since we're on this topic, you can look at other players who've left the club in recent years, and not just under Amorim, and have done well elsewhere. Yeah, Scott McTominay, MVP in the Serie A. He's struggling a little bit this season because they've shifted him over to the left, and Conte's trying to... Well, he first tried to integrate Kevin De Bruyne, who's now injured, but he's changed the system a little bit to a 4-3-3, so that he's having a little bit of a challenge.
McTominay, though.
Yeah, that's right. Højlund started the season well. He's been a bit flat recently. We'll see. He's still a young player. Marcus Rashford, obviously, he's doing very well at Barcelona. I've seen a surprisingly large amount of their games. It's interesting, Rashford, because I think him personally is playing very well and his numbers look very good. He doesn't quite seem like he fits into the Barcelona system. He's the explosive end part. He creates a lot of goals and way more chances than... I think he'd have even more assists if Lewandowski had been fit all season.
Yeah.
I think he'd end up with like 10, 11, 12, right? He's creating a lot of chances. I don't know whether... I'm not sure quite what I'm saying. It feels a bit like a slightly weird cog in that machine.
Yeah.
But he is doing personally very well. Anyway, the point I was trying to make is I think we have a very good tendency at this club to devalue players who are not in the public eye right now. And we forget just what a good young player Kobbie Mainoo was. And when he was in the reserves, I remember I'm sure we talked about him a lot as a player whose game was built very much for playing in an elite side. If he played in a 3 in midfield and he has the right profile, I think we're mad as football fans to go, hey, this play should be completely different. And when managers do it as well, I think they're being very short-sighted.
Yeah.
Jose Mourinho did it with Paul Pogba. Pogba had his limitations, of course, and his time at United wasn't as good as we hoped. But he was like, he's not a 10, he should be an 8, and 8 should play everywhere. And then we complained when he made mistakes defensively.
Yeah.
It's like, and then we complain if Kobbie Mainoo doesn't do all the defensive things he should, or if Bruno doesn't do all the defensive things he should. 11 players in a team. You have overlapping profiles that complement each other in order to make a team that functions well, right? Because not every player is the same thing and they don't all have the same strengths. Yeah. Kobbie Mainoo is a brilliant player in tight spaces. Don't make him be the last defender, and don't expect him to be playing 60-yard balls to feet as Bruno did. Like, profile him right. Yeah. And this manager will not ever do that. And so we're going to come to a painful moment, whether it's this winter or next summer, when we have a real conversation about Mainoo's future, and it will be a sad day for the club.
Just before you close off, he might not do any of those things, but he still wouldn't be 5 yards behind the player when we're trying to clear a corner. I think he'd have the wherewithal to get out in front of the player. So.
My God, that was so criminal. Just
anyway,
unbelievable. That's Ugarte, not just unforgivable. It's just fucking run out, dude. Yeah. All right. Before we get on our soapboxes about that, this has been a long one. Thank you, everyone, for listening. You can catch us on Patreon. You can catch me on Substack. Wayne's there too. You do write occasionally. Your book is out in all good bookstores, shops and shores, and shops and stores. And also Amazon, if you really want to give Bezos some more money, which you don't need to. Buy from your local bookshop. Keep them.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
If you DM Wayne on Twitter or the socials, he'll send you a printed signed copy, probably, won't you? Are you flogging signed copies?
No, now the time has gone. Mate. I mean, if it's I might do it to be kind. If people getting quickly, they might be able to get one.
All right. If you send Wayne some crypto, he will send you a book. All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye now.